Christmas Eve hadn't even reached dessert when my sister picked up her wine glass, tilted it toward me, and said the thing she'd clearly been holding on to all night. "Ada, whatever happened with that engagement? Are you two still just figuring it out?" She said it with a tilt of her head, like she was concerned, like she genuinely cared. The table shifted. My mother's spoon froze over the gravy boat. My father cleared his throat the way he always does when he wants to disappear into the upholstery. My uncle and his wife were visiting from Phoenix. 12 people at that table. My sister had chosen the exact moment with the largest possible audience. I set down my fork, looked right at her. "We figured it out 8 months ago," I said. "Ethan and I are already married." The room went very quiet. My aunt stopped mid-reach for the breadbasket. My uncle blinked. Even the holiday playlist from the kitchen speaker seemed to pause and reconsider. My sister laughed. Not a real laugh, the short, clipped kind she uses to dismiss something before it can take root. She glanced at my mother, then back at me. "Come on." "I'm not joking." She set her glass down, and that's when I saw it, just a flicker behind her eyes. Something she tried to smooth over immediately. Not pure surprise. Recognition. A quick internal recalibration. Like someone who just realized the board had been rearranged while they weren't watching. She didn't know I was going to say it tonight, but she was not completely surprised that it was true. I filed that away and said nothing else. I grew up 20 minutes from that house, which means I have spent 32 years watching the way my family operates from the inside. And from the inside, the pattern was unmistakable, even if no one ever named it out loud. My sister is 4 years older than me, and she has always been the sun in our family's solar system. Not because she was exceptional at any one particular thing, but because she was loud in the right way at the right time, and my parents mistook confidence for achievement early on and never corrected the math. By the time I was old enough to understand the arithmetic, it was already fixed. Her recitals came first. Her college choices generated dinner conversations that lasted for weeks. When she got engaged to Brendan, my parents put a new photo on the mantle before the ring had even been properly sized. I remember standing in that living room and counting 3 framed photos of my sister, 2 of us together from childhood, and 0, not a single one, of just me. I told myself it was coincidence. Kids tell themselves things to survive the imbalance. Then I stopped being a kid, and the math still didn't change. When I earned a photography grant my junior year of college, my mother said, "That's sweet, honey," and pivoted immediately to a story about my sister's promotion. When I moved to Denver and started building a freelance business from nothing, no savings cushion, no backup plan, just my camera equipment, and a second-hand laptop and sheer stubbornness. My parents visited once in 3 years. They drove through twice for my sister's events. When I called to say I'd finally landed the commercial contract that had taken 6 months of pitching to close, my father said, "Good for you, kiddo," then asked if I'd heard about something on the news. Something entirely unrelated. I kept calling anyway. I kept making the 4-hour drive home for every holiday. I kept bringing the good wine, the homemade pie, the thoughtfully chosen gifts, because somewhere in me there was still a version of myself who believed that if I just showed up consistently enough, generously enough, long enough, they would eventually start to meet me somewhere in the middle. Ethan used to hold my hand on the drive back to Denver and say, very gently, "You give them more than they give you back." I'd shrug it off. I'd say families were complicated. I'd say next holiday would be different. I said that for years. The proposal happened on a Tuesday evening on a trail outside the city, with the mountains going purple in the late light, and Ethan crying before I could even get a word out. We'd been together for 3 years. I had never felt more certain about anything. We called my parents that night. My mother said wonderful in the same tone she'd use if I told her I'd found a good parking space. My sister texted back a row of emojis and went quiet. We planned a small ceremony. 40 people, a coastal venue, late May. I wanted something intimate, and I meant that genuinely. I was tired of performing for audiences that weren't paying attention. We'd do it right, do it quietly, and celebrate with the people who actually made us feel like us. 6 months out, I mailed the invitations. One to my parents' house, same address I'd always used, the house I grew up in. One to my sister and Brendan's place. One to my aunt and uncle in Phoenix. 2 more to cousins I'd stayed close with over the years. 5 envelopes total, hand-addressed, sent certified mail because I wanted to be sure. I tracked all 5, checked the delivery confirmations the following week. Every one of them showed delivered. Everyone had been signed for. No one called. I waited a few days, then sent a follow-up message in the family group chat. I emailed my mother. I called twice and got voicemail both times, left messages that weren't returned. I called my sister, straight to voicemail. I texted her directly. I could see the read receipt appear almost instantly. She didn't respond. 3 weeks before the wedding, I stopped chasing. We got married on a Saturday in May, on a cliff above the Pacific, with 40 people who had actually shown up. Our closest friends, Ethan's college roommates, my 2 best friends from art school, who flew in and helped me get ready in a rented beach house bathroom and made me laugh so hard I almost ruined my mascara. His parents, who drove 12 hours and arrived the day before. His sister, who gave a toast that had half the guests crying. His grandmother, who danced in her wheelchair the entire reception and refused to stop when the DJ said the set was ending. It was the best day of my life. The only ache in it was the empty seats that should have held my family. I told myself there had been some mix-up. Mail got lost. People were busy. I wanted to believe in a version of events that didn't require me to face the obvious explanation. So I set it aside. We went on our honeymoon. We came home. I quietly updated my name on my accounts and didn't post anything publicly because I didn't know how to explain the silence without having to explain it, and I wasn't ready for that. 8 months passed. And then it was Christmas Eve, and my sister was asking about my engagement, like it was still an open question, like the answer might be anything. The table was still holding its breath after I said it. My mother found words first. Ada. Her voice was careful, the voice she uses when she wants to manage a situation without admitting it's a situation. If you had gotten married, we would have known. You would have, I agreed. I sent invitations. We never received anything. I know. She looked at my father. He looked at the table. My sister reached for her wine glass again. Mail gets lost sometimes, she said, her voice light, casual, generous with the benefit of the doubt. That happens. All 5 certified envelopes? I said. To 5 different addresses, all confirmed delivered? A beat. Confirmed by who? The Postal Service. I have the tracking records. My uncle leaned back slightly, the way people do when a conversation moves past the point where they can pretend it's not happening and they're not in the room for it. My sister's jaw tightened just barely. Ada, it's Christmas Eve. Can we not do this right now? You asked about my engagement, I said, and kept my voice quiet. I'm answering. I reached into my bag and put my phone on the table between us. I didn't rush. I had thought about this on the drive over, not planned it exactly, but considered it. What I would say, what I didn't need to say, what I'd let the evidence say for me. I opened the tracking history. 5 shipments, 5 addresses, 5 delivery confirmations, all time-stamped, all signed for. My mother leaned forward. Let me see. I pushed the phone toward her. She studied it. My father came around the corner of the table to look over her shoulder, the way he does when he needs to be sure of something. Who signed for ours? He asked. I zoomed in on the signature line for their address. The handwriting was looping and fast. A shorthand formed over decades, the signature my sister had used on everything since high school. Unmistakable to anyone who had ever seen it on a birthday card, a permission slip, a holiday tag. My mother looked up slowly. My sister looked at the ceiling. The carrier confirmed it was received at the house, I said. I called them directly to verify. Mail gets mixed up, my sister said again. Her voice had gone flat this time. "The email, then," I said. I swiped to the next screen. The electronic invitation sent to every address I had on file, including the family email account my mother had set up years ago. The read receipt showed it had been opened. The timestamp placed it 2 weeks before the wedding. And then it had been deleted from the inbox, within 4 minutes of being opened. I had the deletion log because I'd contacted the provider after the fact and asked. My mother's hand came up to cover her mouth. "I don't check that account," my father said. It wasn't defensive, just a fact, stated plainly, the way he states things when he's trying to be honest instead of useful. "I know," I said. My sister pushed back from the table slightly, just a few inches, just enough to create distance. "You're building some kind of case against me at Christmas dinner. You've been planning this." "You asked about my engagement," I said for the 3rd time, in front of 12 people, like you had no idea. "I didn't know you actually went through with it." The words came out before she caught them. I watched the moment she heard herself, the way her eyes briefly closed and then opened again. The table didn't move. "Charlotte," my mother said, just her name, nothing else. But in that single word was something I had never heard my mother direct at my sister: accountability. My sister looked around the table, at my parents, at my uncle and aunt, who were doing their best to be invisible, at Brendan beside her, who was studying his dinner plate like it contained the answer to something. When she looked back at me, something had shifted in her expression. Not guilt, exactly. More like someone calculating the cost of a decision they made a long time ago and are only now being handed the bill. "It was 40 people," she said, "on a cliff. You were going to do it either way. I didn't think." She stopped. "Started again. Your timing's is terrible. My baby shower was that same month. Everything was already about you for 2 weeks on social media with the engagement, and I needed it to not be one more thing." The table went, so still I could hear the heater running in the next room. "So you threw away my invitations," I said. "I didn't throw them away, You hid them for 8 months." She pressed her lips together. "I thought you'd reschedule. I thought when no one came you'd just do it again later, bigger." "I didn't reschedule," I said. "I got married, without my family. And I spent 8 months believing that meant I didn't matter enough for any of you to pick up the phone." That landed. I could see it land, not just on my sister, but on my parents. On my mother, who had said, "We never received anything with such certainty." On my father, who had stared at his plate and said nothing in my defense as usual, but whose face now carried something that looked like genuine grief. "I spent so many years trying to earn my place here," I said. "I wasn't angry. I was past anger. Anger would have required energy I'd already spent. I drove 4 hours each way. I brought everything. I called, I texted, I followed up. I kept making room at tables where nobody was keeping room for me." My aunt made a soft sound. My uncle looked at the wall. "I just needed this to be mine," my sister said, and she was crying now. Not the performative kind, the real kind. The kind that leaks out when someone doesn't mean to cry. "Everything was always such a big thing with you. The grant, the business, the engagement, and I just needed 1 year." "It was my wedding," I said quietly. "Not 1 year. My wedding." I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, a small, clean sound. My mother said my name. My father started to rise. I walked to him first and put my hand briefly on his shoulder. He covered it with his immediately, and his hand was warm and not quite steady, and I let it stay there for a moment before I stepped back. "I didn't come tonight to punish anyone," I said. "I came because I needed you to know what happened, and now you do." I picked up my bag. I walked down the hallway, the one lined with framed school photos, more of my sister than of me, which I'd spent years convincing myself I hadn't noticed, and now I noticed with a clarity that felt almost like relief. The same coat rack, the same ceramic wreath on the door, the same snowman on the entry table that had been there since I was 8 years old. I had tried so hard to belong to this place. Year after year, holiday after holiday, 4 hours both ways, carrying wine and pie, and the stubborn, quiet hope that something would eventually change. That if I just gave enough, was grateful enough, asked for little enough, they would finally see me. I understood now, walking toward the door, that I had been waiting for something that was never going to come. Not because my family was incapable of love. They loved each other. In the specific way they'd always organized love, with my sister at the center and everyone else arranged around her. But there was no arrangement left over for me that didn't require my smallness. The cold hit me when I stepped outside, sharp and clean and completely real. Ethan was home. We'd agreed I would go alone, because I wasn't sure what I was walking into, and he'd respected that the way he respects everything. Without pressing, without making it about him. When I got back and the door opened, he was on the couch with a book, and he read my face in about half a second and put the book down. "How was it?" he said. I sat down next to him. He wrapped his arm around me without being asked. "Hard," I said, "but also finished." He knew what I meant by finished. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the end of anything I could point to cleanly. It was more like reaching the last page of a very long book you'd been telling yourself you wanted to finish, and setting it down and realizing you feel mostly just tired and a little lighter. His family called the next morning, Christmas Day, because they call every holiday, always, without exception or asterisk. His mother asked how I was sleeping. His father wanted to know if I'd tried the lemon cake recipe he'd sent me. His sister texted a photo of her kids opening gifts and included me in the caption without thinking twice. The way you include someone who simply belongs, the way you don't notice you're doing it, because of course you do it. I sat with that for a long time. There is something strange and a little disorienting about realizing in your early 30s that the love you were born into was never quite shaped like you needed it to be. That you spent years folding yourself smaller and quieter and more convenient, and it never actually changed anything, because the problem was not how much space you were taking up. The problem was that certain people had decided quietly and a long time ago that your space was negotiable. My sister left a voicemail 3 days later, long and careful and technically an apology, in the way that a legal settlement is technically a resolution. I listened to it once. I didn't call back. Not to punish her. I was finished with the energy that punishment requires. But because I recognized what was underneath the words. She was still more frustrated at being caught than sorry for what she'd done, and I needed more than that, and I was finally willing to say so, at least to myself. My mother texted, brief messages, cautious ones, testing the temperature. I replied sometimes. My father called, and we talked for almost an hour. He didn't defend himself or my sister or the years of patterns that led to this. He asked questions and waited for my answers. Real answers, not the reassuring ones I'd spent years training myself to give. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. I cried twice. He did too. I don't know what comes next between us, but that call was real in a way that almost nothing between us had ever been, and I'm holding that carefully. Ethan's family had us over for dinner on the 26th. His mother had made too much of everything, as she always does, and there were candles on the table, and a dog underfoot the entire time, and everyone talked over each other in that warm, easy way that sounds like chaos and feels like belonging. His father asked about a project I'd mentioned in October, remembered it, followed up, listened to my answer. His grandmother, who is 81 and has no patience for small talk, told me my photographs made her feel like she was somewhere else, and meant it as the highest compliment she had. I looked around that table somewhere in the middle of dessert and noticed something embarrassingly simple. I was not performing. I was not managing. I was not counting the seconds until I could stop calibrating how much of myself to reveal. I was just sitting with people who found it natural to know me, and it was enough. More than enough. It was the exact thing I had been driving 4 hours each way to find somewhere it didn't exist. The weeks since have been quieter than I expected. The ache is still there, but it's changed shape. Less like a wound and more like a scar, something I can feel the outline of without having to press on it constantly. My mother and I are still finding our way. My father is trying in ways that feel new and unsteady and real. My sister and I haven't spoken, and I haven't decided yet what to do about that, and I am allowing myself the grace of not needing to decide right now. What I know is that for a long time, I kept arriving with my arms full and my heart open, and I kept leaving feeling hollowed out, and I told myself that was just what family felt like. I told myself I just needed to try harder, give more, ask for less. And what I finally understand, not with bitterness, but with the quiet clarity that comes after a long, cold drive home, is that the people who actually see you don't need to be convinced to look. They just look. You walk in the door and they make room without being asked because it never once occurred to them not to. I have that now. I have Ethan and his family, and the friends who flew in and made me laugh in a rented beach house bathroom on the best day of my life. I have a marriage that exists whether my family witnessed it or not. And I have all the energy I used to spend trying to earn a place that should have already been mine. And I'm still figuring out what to build with it, but for the first time, that question feels like possibility instead of loss. If any part of this found you, if you've ever felt like the guest in your own family's story, I want you to know you are not imagining it and you are not alone. Tell me where you're listening from in the comments below, and if this one stayed with you, subscribe because I'll be right here.